Welcome.
Hi, Denise.
Hi, I'm Denise Comer. This is a Google Hangout writing workshop affiliated with English Composition 1, Achieving Expertise, which is a MOOC offered in partnership between Duke University and Coursera. And we are here to workshop um, some people's drafts of Project One, which is the first project in our course. And I'm here from at Duke in Durham, North Carolina, and we have two learners with us today. Do you want to introduce yourselves and say where you are joining us from, and then we'll go ahead and get started after that?
Sure, I'll begin. I'm Brenda Thomas, and I'm joining you from Minnesota, the United States.
Hi, Brenda. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. And Carla, can you hear us? Karen.
Yes, Denise, I can hear you, but I think you want another student.
Are you? So Karen is one of our wonderful CTAs, community TAs, and I'm so glad to see you. I don't think I've actually gotten to see you, but hi, welcome. You. Why don't you introduce yourself anyways, and then we'll figure out what maybe your role is, or.
Introduce myself. Well, I was one of the lucky ones who joined the course in spring with a lack of confidence, and I'm very happy to be here as a CTA now. I'm living in France. In fact, I'm a health coach, so moving from Belgium 2 years ago into France, I had to change my cabinet and stuff. So while I'm putting everything in order, I decided to follow some courses, and that's how I got into English composition, which I loved very much.
Well, thank you, and we were lucky to have you, and we're really lucky to have you as one of the CTAs along with the other CTAs. I really appreciate your work on the forums and helping answer questions and keep the course running smoothly. Thank you.
Thank you
So.
very much.
We are going to workshop Brenda's paper. Karen, I'm not sure if you want to, if you would like to stay in the Hangout. You know, all writers can benefit from all kinds of feedback, and so I'm sure that would be a wonderful thing to have a conversation about Brenda's paper. But if you have, if you were imagining yourself as watching rather than participating, that's okay too. So I'll just let you decide what you want to do.
I think it's more interesting for the students if they have the chance to work over their papers. It's more interesting for them to discuss it, of course. So
okay,
if
I think that's great. So that means you want to stay, right? Is that what
I don't mind to stay, but I think it's more in the benefit for the students that they discuss their work.
Okay, that's fine. So thank you, and please, you know, hope to see you again sometime soon. So Brenda, what we are going to do today, we're going to model a one-on-one writing consultation and conference between with me and you. And so we have your draft, and those of you who are watching it live or watching it later, you can go to the special forum on week 2 where you can find Brenda's paper. I think what we're going to follow is a model where I first review with you the Project One criteria so we know what we're looking for, and then I will ask you, Brenda, what your main concerns are. All writers know their own projects the best, and themselves as writers the best. So I want you to have a chance to say what your concerns were, what you'd especially like feedback on. And then I'll ask you if you are okay with it, Brenda, to read your paper aloud. The practice of reading aloud is really important. I think it's nice to hear your words spoken, and sometimes as writers we understand what we've tried to say differently as we read it aloud. And then we'll go from there, and I'll give feedback, and you'll give feedback to yourself too. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. So let's first look at the Project One criteria. This is under. I'm pulling it up right now. So the grading criteria for the project, I'll just run through the list really quickly, was to summarize Coyle's project in his terms. This is Daniel Coyle's The Sweet Spot, which is a chapter from his book, The Talent Code. To effectively use Coyle's text to support and develop your own argument, to integrate evidence in the form of quotes and paraphrases, employ scholarly conventions for citing sources, recognize the uses and limits of Coyle's argument, organize your review clearly, revise deeply, and include an effective title. So in addition to those, Brenda, what would you like feedback on? What are you especially keen to think about with your project?
I never like my conclusions on anything. I feel like I struggle with wrapping things all up and in a good way, in an efficient way. So my conclusion, yeah, I would like feedback on that. And I also wasn't sure if my approach for how I handle this, being as it's a critical review, if I had it sounding academic enough or if I was maybe too casual in it. Those were some things I was wondering.
Okay, great. So we will comment on all of those as we move through. And are you able to read the paper aloud for us?
If that's what you want, sure.
That would be great. Thank you, Brenda.
Okay.
Okay.
A critical look at Coyle's Code for Talent. Dribble, dribble, jump, spin clockwise, shoot the basketball, bank it off the backboard, and then land on my feet as the ball goes through the net. That is what was supposed to happen. One summer, as a teenager, I rehearsed that basketball play repeatedly on our homemade basketball court, a cement driveway and wooden backboard with metal rim and ratty net mounted to the garage roof. I thought I was perfecting a sick basketball move. Apparently I was doing something else, growing greatness by engaging in deep practice. Deep practice is defined by Daniel Coyle in his book The Talent Code as struggling in certain targeted ways, operating at the edges of our ability, where you make mistakes in a way that makes a person smarter. Is that what I was doing on the driveway, basketball in hand, as I struggled toward a targeted goal, pushed my current basketball abilities to their limits, and made mistakes? I certainly did make mistakes. Mistake after mistake after mistake. Over time, those mistakes were corrected by slowing down, practicing the move episodically, and then speeding up and putting it all together. According to Coyle, I was practicing deeply by capturing failure and turning it into skill. I had found the sweet spot. The sweet spot is actually not so much a spot or point, but rather a gap between the two edges of what a person can and cannot do. Coyle quotes UCLA psychology chair Robert Bjork in defining that sweet spot as an optimal gap between what you know and what you're trying to do. Coyle says the trick to finding that spot or gap is to choose a goal just beyond your present abilities, to target the struggle not by thrashing blindly but by reaching. Coyle believes he has proven this theory with evidence from what he calls talent hotbeds. These were tiny places throughout the world where he found Everest-size amounts of talent in a variety of activities: soccer, singing, and clarinet playing. He introduces his readers to Brunillo, Jenny, and Clarissa as they practice deeply by purposely operating at the edge of their ability in a way that forces themselves to make mistakes, yet paradoxically improve by doing so. According to Coyle, if we do that, we are like Brunillo, learning the elastico, Jenny singing Running Out of Time, and Clarissa playing Golden Wedding on the clarinet. Like them, what we might be doing looks strange, but comes with surprising results. However, those results are chalked up to our brains, rather than nature and nurture combined with passion. What is happening in the brain? Bjork is quoted in Coyle's book as explaining it like building scaffolding in our brains. This scaffolding is built by generating impulses as we encounter and overcome difficulties. As the scaffolding increases, the learning velocity speeds up. As the learning velocity increases, the skill level rises, and greatness, maybe even perfection, grows. Or does it? Coyle says yes, and his evidence rests upon examples such as the World Cup winning streak by Brazil and the decrease in pilot error causing aviation accidents after the invention and use of flight simulators. He attributes Brazilian success in winning 5 World Cup victories to the widespread playing of futsal in that country. The game of futsal, because of the tight space, small number of participants, and its less bouncy ball, provides players with a means for deep practice. And since it has been played longer and by more people in that country, naturally they excel at football, or soccer in the United States, compared to other countries. However, football fans around the world are well aware that Brazil faltered in the 2014 World Cup. Had they stopped playing futsal in that country? No. This implies that other factors come into play, pun intended. If their deep practicing did not cease, then something else is the cause. Something similar could be said for air pilot crash statistics. Even though flight simulators have been in use for around 50 years, there still are aviation accidents caused by pilot error. Yes, those statistics are lower than pre-simulator days, but crashes due to pilot error have not been eradicated by flight simulator use. Just as with Brazilian football, something else comes into play that deep practice and sweet spot finding cannot eliminate or overcome. For devotees of the theory of finding the sweet spot through deep practice, that might be a bitter pill to swallow. However, one element absent from Coyle's first chapter is that of waning abilities of athletes, musicians, and pilots, to name a few. As bodies and brains age, talent either stalls or diminishes, even though a person continues to practice, even with deep practice. It seems this sort of practice can take a person only so far. Talent peaks, and then we fall off or gently roll away from that peak. Coyle, at least, in the first chapter of his book, does not address this or the possibilities for it. Coyle's theory is appealing because we all would like to reach out and touch greatness in one talent or another. His theory also is backed by some evidence, but that evidence is not without limitation. Any talent achieved through deep practice can be, and likely will be, lost even in the midst of continuing such practice. Did I ever achieve the basketball move I so ardently practiced? Yes, but I never used it in a game. However, after reading Coyle's chapter, I have one possible reason for why and how I learned that skill. Could I still perform that skill today? Not without some deep practice, and even then it would probably end up looking more like a thrash than a reach.
Thank you so much. That was great. And again, I really think that reading aloud helps writers hear their words with a different ear. And so I know we're running live. Those of you who are watching it later could choose to listen or not. So I know it doesn't make for, I don't know if it makes for scintillating TV to have someone reading aloud, but we're actually doing something different than TV, so that's good. So I will provide some feedback, and Karin, I'd really welcome you providing feedback too. I think Brenda would appreciate hearing your thoughts too. So please do contribute. So I first wanted to say that I really liked your introduction. I think I like the you bring readers right in, Brenda, with an exciting activity, and it's relevant to what Coyle is talking about. It's italicized, so I think you're attending to matters of document design and thinking about that. And although it's not as conventionally academic in tone as we might expect from other kinds of academic writing, I think it's perfectly fitting here. I really like it, and I would not suggest that you move towards more of a formal academic tone. Karin, what was your impression specifically regarding tone of that introduction?
Well, I had the same remark. Actually, I love to read it. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. When I read it, my first impression is I really got carried away in the way she was writing it. And it's not really the academic style as we have learned to use. But I agree that she really has mixed a lot of her personal experiences, and she combined it very nicely in what Paul is trying to convey. So
good. And I will also comment, Brenda, on a few other things that I think I found really strong that as you are revising and moving on to other writing projects, you might just want to keep in mind that that you do really well, and that others can look at also. I think that your transitions, by and large, between paragraphs help the project move smoothly from point to point. So as a first example, at the end of the first paragraph, you have a line that says growing greatness by engaging in deep practice, and so you've introduced the key term under consideration, and then in the very next paragraph that term appears really as the first term too, and that offers readers a thread, right, that they can follow from paragraph to paragraph. You make the same move between paragraphs 2 and 3 with the sweet spot, which is another key term. So you're adhering to one of the criteria for project 1 and for critical review by thinking about summarizing Coyle's project in his terms. You're using his terms, and you're also threading them nicely throughout with transitions. I thought that you chose the ways to summarize Coyle. You chose strong examples. You touched on the 3 people that he introduced us to, Brunio, Jenny, and Clarissa, and then you also consolidated the main evidence that he used, which is primarily soccer and the World Cup and the pilot error with the flight simulators. So I think readers who hadn't yet read Coyle would have a fairly accurate sense of what he was talking about in his chapter. You integrated quotes very well also. You offer variety in the way that you integrate quotes, and you nest them within your own sentences. If we look at the 4th paragraph, you write, Coyle believes he has proven this theory with evidence from what he calls talent hotbeds. These were tiny places throughout the world where he found, quote, Everest-size amounts of talent. And I think you make that move several times where you have his words interspersed with yours, and it's very clear where his words are and yours are, and as well as in being integrated into your project. I also like the questions that you ask throughout. I think the best kinds of academic writing have inquiry at the basis of it, and I feel like there's a sense of inquiry, even if it's in challenging, right? Is this right, or can it be, or did I do this, and all kinds of inquiry, and I like those questions too. And I thought, just in terms of tone too, I think you are countering something or pointing out a limitation, but you are doing it in a way that is respectful and generous to what he has said, right? So you're not suggesting that his project is totally erroneous, right? So but yet it's a yes, but, right? Yes, but there's also this other element. And the main argument that I took from your critical review was that deep practice and finding the sweet spot might advance people far in achieving their talent, but there is also on the other end a cap on how persistent, how long that talent might persist, right? Or how capable that sweet spot practice might be depending on who we are. And that's an important caveat to his project. I feel like when you first introduced that idea, it appears on page 2 in the top long paragraph, and I like to use paragraphs as moments of emphasis in a project. So busy readers sometimes read beginnings of paragraphs and ends of paragraphs, but also paragraphing offers us a way of emphasizing for readers what's important, where our eyes are drawn to paragraphs. So currently, I think the first sentence where you're getting to your argument occurs, however, football fans around the world are well aware that Brazil faltered. Is that right? Is that where you're first moving into your argument? It's in the middle of that paragraph on page 2.
Yes. Yes.
And so I would encourage you to actually use a paragraph break there. Not so much because the paragraph is too long, that's not the issue. It's more that you want to emphasize where you're kind of moving as a writer to another aspect of the project. And I did notice also that in what will now be, maybe perhaps if you choose to do it, the preceding paragraph, which begins, Coyle says yes, that paragraph has fewer quotes than others, and it's not just that you have to include quotes. There's many reasons not to include quotes, but I did feel like that was one moment where, as a reader, if I hadn't read Coyle recently, I might not quite understand it as thoroughly as the other elements.
Okay.
If you wanted to clarify a little bit more about that. I'll say one more thing, and then Karen, am I pronouncing your name right? Is it Karen or Karen?
I listen to anyone.
Okay, so Karen.
In Dutch it's Karin. But I know that it's very difficult to pronounce, so no problem.
Okay, I'll try. Maybe I'll get it after a few weeks. So then I'll turn to you to give some feedback too, and then we can also talk about your conclusion, Brenda. But I thought that one other moment that you might want to reconsider, Brenda, could be that you mentioned Bjork in 2 different places, and I wasn't sure that Bjork was as necessary in the first mention as he was in the second mention. I wasn't sure that what you were quoting advanced was necessary at that moment. So I think that's on the bottom of page 1.
Okay.
No, here. Oh, here. So he's in the 3rd paragraph. And then the bottom, that's fine because I think you're wanting to define the sweet spot. When you first mention him, you say, Coyle quotes UCLA psychology chair Robert Bjork in defining the sweet spot as an optimal gap. And so I think that's fine because you're helping to define your term. But on the bottom of page 1, where you mentioned Bjork, I felt like that was connected to what you then were trying to say later on in the paper. Well, maybe I'm confused now. No, actually, that was what it was. Those were the 2 mentions, and I felt like maybe it would be helpful to have them consolidated together.
Oh, not so far apart.
Yeah, I just felt like it was returning to Bjork, and it's maybe giving Bjork more of a more play in the paper than he needs to have. I think one moment there is fine for him.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. So let me pause there and turn to Karin to hear what you would like to say.
Well, there's not that much I can add. The one thing I noticed that it's not only in this essay. It's what I remember, what I learned from reading Coyle is that he really uses the examples of futsal, for example, to emphasize the small places and the hard work they are doing and concentrating. And I emphasize that much more than what happened with the football. They were doing fine, and now they're not doing fine. So, because what I notice is, I've read it before the World Championship of 2014, when Brazil has really lost the games, and I feel that now people are picking up, yes, but it wasn't like that. It's not that anymore. But he wrote his book before that happened. So it's another context. And maybe that's why I emphasized more the background of the futsal, what that people picked up. They really try to learn their dribbles in small places with this hard ball that hardly bounces. And so to emphasize that more, but it's really the only thing I noticed when I read it.
Your comment also makes me realize, though, that another corollary cap on how long the sweet spot, on the sustainability of the sweet spot in deep practice, is that, I mean, rarely do countries continue to. Well, I'm probably going to get challenged on this. I'm not sure how long countries or teams can continue to dominate in their particular sports or talents, right? It seems like often people who are very talented, it's not just that they have a peak because they age out, but even maybe certain teams shift. And sometimes there are structural and institutional reasons for that, right? That they have to move to the lower draft stage or whatever, but maybe there's also just sort of a cyclical nature to, or a dynamic nature to achievement that happens also. And I don't know if that's something that you would want to introduce in your conclusion to, like a broader scale of not just that it's individual aging or slowness too. When you move into your conclusion, what you do very strongly, Brenda, is you return to the beginning of the paper. It's a circular move, right? So sometimes that's really great to do. In this case, I think it is really great to do. It's strong because it returns readers to where you were. I would not suggest it as a pattern for every single writing that we do, because sometimes it works better than others, but in this case, very well. And it certainly helps, it signals to readers that you're moving into a concluding idea. So sometimes writers write in conclusion, and I often find that there might be, in some writing occasions, other creative ways of signaling to readers that you're concluding, and this is one of them, and that's nice. But I wasn't sure that as you returned to your question about you and this stick basketball move, I wasn't sure that you fully got back into the idea of what that you brought out in your argument, because your argument was that people, our brains and bodies slow down and change over time, but I felt like in the conclusion, maybe, could I still perform that skill today? Well, no, because you haven't been doing deep practice all along. It's not necessarily only because you are older than you were, when you were a teenager, but because you hadn't been doing it. So I think make the point more connected, more closely connected to your argument would be one suggestion. And then, like I said, maybe thinking about a way to even heighten the stakes of what's already a very compelling, complex argument, and that we, as humans, are limited in certain ways just by our mortality. So you can even heighten it even further with something else too. I don't know.
Okay.
if you need to. That sentence, the bitter pill to swallow sentence, yeah. I really like that sentence. I really do, and I was wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wasn't. I like it so much that part of me thought maybe you want to have that in your conclusion somewhere, as in more of a prominent place. I'm not sure, but it's such a great sentence. It was one of my favorite sentences of your project.
Yeah, I probably should have saved it for the conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's see. We've addressed tone and conclusion and the integration of evidence. Oh, I did want to say one matter of citation on the first page, the third paragraph, is the words "an optimal gap between what you know and what you're trying to do." Are those Bjork's words or Coyle's words?
Yeah, see, I didn't know how to word that because it was in Coyle's book, but it was Bjork's words, and so I struggled. Yeah, it's awkward and clumsy, and I know it is because I struggled with how would I have done that better to show that it's Bjork's words, but it's in Coyle's book.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you do frame it, you say Coyle quotes, and so you're trying to frame it in that way. The way that you signal it with citation would be, it's on page 19 of Coyle's book, but write in MLA citation, you write QTD, which stands for quoted, so QTD period in Coyle 19.
Okay.
And we'd have to check on the rules for other schools of citation, how they would accomplish that, but that's what MLA would be. So QTD period in Coyle 19. And in my own writing, generally I try to go directly to a source rather than have that QTD. So I would maybe try to pull up Bjork, and I would say that Coyle draws heavily on Robert Bjork, and then I would quote Bjork in that way. But I think in this case, since it's a critical review of Coyle, I think it's fine to do the QTD.
Okay.
So what other questions do you have for Karine or me?
I think you've answered them all. Maybe my last question, I was wondering if I was too subtle, or if I didn't draw out enough where I was pointing out the strengths and the weaknesses of Coyle's arguments. So I didn't come right out and say, well, this is where he's weak and this is where he's strong. Should I have pointed that out more overtly that I was doing that?
Karine, I'll let you respond first.
What do you see as his? What do you really want to express as the strengths and weaknesses? Because I did read the strengths of it, but I think indeed that it's possible to express them a little more, and maybe I was wondering whether you were afraid to shock anyone. As well for the limitations, as well as for the strong points, the strengths. Clear?
Yeah, we heard. Did you want to respond, Brenda?
Then I heard it.
I don't know if I understand her question. She's wanting to know what I thought the limitations were, and I got to that. I feel like I got to that too late, maybe in my review, and that's why I'm not happy with my conclusion, because I have the limitations and the conclusion kind of crammed in at the end. That's my response.
Yeah, so maybe you could expand more on the limitations and how humans can't persist.
Go
ahead, were you going to say something?
Can I speak? Well, I'm not used to this.
Mm-hmm.
Are you hearing me?
We can hear you now. Yeah, you went out for a second, but we can hear you now.
No, it's just the only concern I have is that it's not really a concern, but I was wondering whether whether you are afraid to express them.
Oh, I understand your question.
Especially the limitations.
Yes, I was hesitant to do that, mainly because, wow, I know how much work writers put into researching and writing and putting out a book, and
No.
I thought, well, who am I to criticize a published author, on the scale that he is? And so you're right, I was hesitant to do that. Mhm.
Now, I don't know if I'm not the expert here neither, but expressing the limitations, I think it's perfect. I always try that, and then I believe it's perfectly possible to write something. Even if you write about a limitation, you can express that in a positive tone. You understand what I mean?
I think that's a wonderful point, and I bet Daniel Coyle would welcome the feedback, a chance to think about a different perspective on his argument. So in a way, it's a real sign of respect and engagement to think critically and deeply about someone's argument, no matter who you are, who they are.
Uh, I don't know if what I try to do if I write something about limitations and the strengths of it, bring the end with a positive tone. So if you want to use to put both in it, just end with the strengths. And when you talk about the limitations, I always try to remain positive, and sometimes it's a very hard exercise to try to avoid negations and turn your sentences in a way that even though you are saying something negative, avoid the negations. Avoid the negations.
And so you do, I mean, you have what will be 2 paragraphs where you're questioning, you're addressing the limitations. And so maybe I think what Karine is suggesting is that you could have a stronger voice in those paragraphs, right? A stronger engagement with the limitations. And then you do, at the bottom of page 2, you write, Coyle's theory is appealing because we would all like to reach out and touch greatness in one talent or another. So I feel like you are definitely giving credit and acknowledgement to what are the strengths of his theory, and it's backed by some evidence. So it's definitely, I heard that, yes, and so maybe increasing the voice of the but might be
Okay.
might help authorize you to engage with him.
Okay.
Other questions?
No,
Other comments? Okay, great. So thank you so much for sharing your writing with so many people. And Karine, thank you so much for your incredibly insightful questions. And I really enjoyed that conversation about hesitancy and writerly authority. That's great. So thank you for raising that.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you to Genevieve and Elise. Watching or will watch. It's nice to it's nice that you're watching. Thanks. And I hope you enjoy and do a hangout sometime too. I'd love to meet you. Thank you. All right, and Brenda, thank you again.
Well, thank you all for the feedback. It's been very helpful. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks. All right, well, have a great day, and hopefully we'll encounter each other again sometime.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.